right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Just waiting a little minute to make sure we can start. We're going to give it a start now. So this session brought by Snowflake. So today we're going to show you about data observability, but specifically applied for your Snowflake usage, for your Snowflake utilization you're doing. And the idea is to look how to bring it around cost optimization. Oops. A quick introduction for Snowflake if you never heard about it. So Snowflake is a data observability tool. So we are an end-to-end solution to bring data observability in your data stack. And our goal is really to move from data chaos that you can have in your data pipeline. So from errors, from pipeline broken, from unknown schema changes, etc., to being able to organize that in a fashionly manner, in a way that is going to be comprehensive for everyone in the organization, to put everyone in sync in this idea, and to create calm and make sure like the data is flowing correctly for everyone in the organization. So in this case, our mission is to reduce data entropy, and I'm going to define a bit more this point after if you're not familiar with this term. We're a French startup with 3 co-founders. They come from a background working at Amazon, at Uber, at Goldman Sachs, and each of them had, with different data stacks, legacy or very modern, they had the same issue, data quality issues and problems to see those data issues in their environment, be able to resolve those issues, and being able to pass information with the teams when it comes to those issues. We are trusted by those different brands that we can touch on as well after. And what I'm going to show you now is like what is more data entropy and how to reduce that. So entropy is really the tendency of things, in this case of data, of your systems, to become disordered over time. And this is like something you might have learned in physics when you were at uni or in high school. But this kind of tendency of entropy is going in a way that is always increasing. And our goal is really to reduce this entropy, making sure like things are coming into order in your organization. But the reality is for you with your data stack is you have more data, more tools be involved, more people as well included in this process with the areas like opening your data platform internally so people can go and check the data themselves. It's a great way for your organization to leverage the data and bring value about this kind of massive amount of data you can have internally. But obviously that brings some issues. One being like more complexity, you have more process that you are implemented, you will see more incident in your data pipeline, and the impact can be quite substantial from C-level executive kind of dashboards you will see to some individuals that will make decision on their own data that being able, like for example, to work with on the Snowflake or some of your Snowflake table. If this data is not being controlled in one way or another, you're going to have this kind of impact that can obviously impact down the line your revenue, for example. And obviously, there is a question about trust, data trust in this case. So really the goal is to de-risk data democratization in your organization here, where you will be able to observe your data, add quality monitoring, and bring back the trust in these organizations. So how do we do that? It's, as I was mentioning earlier, is end-to-end data platform. So from ingestion to your data warehouse, data lake, transformation tools such as dbt, up to your BI tool. And the goal is to have a full overview and put tests along the way for those data And this aimed to be usable and beneficiary for all those different stakeholders in the organization, which are either data producers or data consumers. And data quality monitoring, in a nutshell, is quite complex in those organizations. Is like identifying the issues if you don't have any quality checks in place that's coming back upwards in your kind of like the chain of problems, and figure out what could be the cause, understanding the impact it can be having in your organization for like who are the users downstream, what are the impact in terms of infrastructure, figuring out the root cause analysis, troubleshooting that, planning to resolve that, and doing some post-mortem. And the goal is to avoid that in the future. And obviously, it's mainly a siloed and manual kind of work. You don't have end-to-end coverage. You're only monitoring known issues. Some of the tests are usually basic tests that you implement and check on a regular basis, but not potentially automated. And if you have like some automated manner, maybe you end up in kind of alert fatigue in this case. So how some of our clients are using Snowflake. So if I take the case of Carrefour Links, which is a direct subsidiary of Carrefour and handle the data of Carrefour brand, it's about making sure they spot data errors, data anomalies in the data before the suppliers will come and find those data and can be associated with a cost in this case. And in the case of Carrefour, those are kind of driven by business users who are going to implement those monitors. And that moved really from 2 weeks of implementation for those individuals, because they had to go through different steps. They had to involve data engineers potentially, to only a few hours or a few minutes, because the aim of the interface is to be user-friendly for any type of data users. In the case of BBC Studio, it's about a migration to a new data platform, and they saw in Snowflake a good way to bring cataloging of the data, lineage of the data, and observability of the data in one single place. So those are two of the stories of our clients, and I'm going quickly to show you like a simple way to create monitors on Snowflake before we really focus on the data FinOps aspect for Snowflake. So let's say I want to monitor specifically one of the tables that has been cataloged here on my Snowflake instance called project demo. And I can see I have all those different assets, which are here some BigQueries, Snowflake, and Tableau dashboard, for example. Looking at the orders table, as I know already this kind of table and I know what kind of column I'm facing specifically here, I'm a business user and I want to track my order total. So being able to figure out what is the revenue brought in this table specifically. So this is kind of a simple kind of calculation, which is outside the classic type of data engineering test that you can also do with a platform, such as here looking at application, distribution change, nulls, unicity of fields, doing potentially some format validation with bringing your regular expression, checking for the completeness, freshness, duplication, and schema change of the data. So the goal is to be within one platform to be able to address those kind of different use case and also those business use case. So looking at my order total we were speaking about, so I'm going to do the sum of order total here specifically. And ask Snowflake, for example, to use 90 days of my data in this table to figure out the seasonality of the data set and being able to predict future trends and tell me if there is outliers. Going to move on and leave the default setting in this example. Ask Snowflake to check that on a daily basis. And for me, it's just low in terms of severity, it's just more being informed about that. I'm going to receive a Slack notification if there is any alert specifically. As you can see, it was very easy and approachable for any type of users. I don't need to know SQL or to write a SQL query. I don't need to know to put a machine learning pipeline to figure out the seasonality of my data set. Snowflake does that automatically for me in this case. But for the more data savvy of you and the more like automation gurus that you are potentially in this crowd, you can convert all this kind of monitors that you're doing with user interface in a YAML format, which means you can parameterize that and include that in your CI/CD pipeline, save that in your GitHub repository, for example. So if I go back and see we have failed, which means Snowflake found some issues in the very last data point. The gray area will be the seasonality that Snowflake determined to be according to this data set. And the black line is the actual value on the day-to-day basis for my revenue. For example, here we're about 2.1 million in this case. But it did find some outliers at some point. And the value of Snowflake in this case is to be able to feed back to the model those kind of information and say, well, actually, it's expected that we drop a bit in revenue here, and Snowflake is going to adapt the model in the future. So as you can see, it's a two-way communication. Here it's an example with kind of machine learning based type of monitoring. You saw all the examples, at least the list of type of monitor, checking for nodes, checking for duplication. So it's a really wide variety of test and use case you can have here with Snowflake. So that was a quick introduction to Snowflake. So now let's dive specifically to the topic of today about FinOps and cost monitoring specifically here. So the first thing is why FinOps and why cost monitoring that we might have. And I think the good thing to bring back is some context about the benefit in your case of using Snowflake, because it's a fantastic platform and fantastic tool. I'm not going to read one by one in all of them, but yeah, automated in many ways, granular access control, cross-cloud replication, and obviously scalability that it offers you, and cost efficiency, as you will only pay for what you are using. And you have obviously a separation between the storage and the compute. But when it comes to clouds, there is some big unexpected. And we saw that in the news in many ways and many different formats. So those one are not specifically picked for Snowflake, but it's to illustrate that it's a concern in the industry, a concern for data practitioners to keep that in mind. 81% of IT teams directed to reduce or halt cloud spending by C-suites. Or to manage costs and in a dynamic economy with FinOps. Or 2/3 of data teams report cloud spending as a critical KPI. So that's kind of top of mind for organization, making sure this is not going out of track. And then when I was preparing for this session, I found this very interesting article. So here we're speaking about more the infrastructure for hosting a website specifically, but it's extremely relatable as it's kind of a cloud solution as well. So the person who invented the website, I Have Been Pwned. If you don't know this website, it's a fantastic way to figure out if you've been, if your email address, if your phone number or password being basically act on different platforms. So this is kind of a website to aggregate all this kind of information. So the person who put that in place, this website in place, used to be able to support 141 million monthly queries at a cost of around $0.2 Australian dollars per day. And something happened in his platform, some potential misconfiguration. He didn't follow carefully, he didn't put in place checks, and he ended up with a 11,000 Australian dollar Azure bill at the end of the month. So imagine at the scale of your organization, if things got out of range, out of control, if you didn't put in place the right things, the right tools to measure and track that can be costly. So how can you deal with it? The current state, in particular, if I speak with some of my clients, so obviously we saw that it's top of mind, but that's the problem. It's always until like you have to deal with all the higher priority in the organization, and you might not have like a system that bring you notification and remind you if like at some point there is something going wrong with your environment. When you have time, what I see with some of my clients, they will run like some kind of monthly, quarterly, or maybe end of year control, just like as a kind of checking the how much spending, how much credit usage they've been consuming. So often it's saved in some SQL worksheets on Snowflake. So if I actually move to my Snowflake here, so here I have my first query, which is checking for my overall credit usage in the past 90 days. We have just at 12,000 queries. The second query is going to check that more like on the time-based case, the time-based values. I think I just need to change the axis. So we can see like we had an increase in consumption from around very end of November. It's kind of a weekly seasonality. And maybe running another one to go a bit deeper and understand specifically here, looking with the warehouse, and we can see at some point here, I'm using a new compute warehouse, which is starting to consume a lot. But one of the limitations here is like, I have to do that proactively. So you can be a team member doing that maybe, as I was saying, on a monthly or quarterly or yearly basis and reviewing that. And obviously the harm is already done if you've been consuming too much and you haven't checked that and kept that under control, a tight control in your organization. Other solution could be to leverage some kind of dashboarding. So I think this one is being done with Tableau. But again, it's pretty much like potentially high level or being kind of like something you will consume and consult like once in a while, and the harm will be already done if you consume too much of your credits or if you have like issues with some of your warehouses, etc. And there is obviously specialized and kind of costly tools. So limitation overall, ad hoc, missing proactive alertings in some of those one, lack of depth in many cases, in particular if you do some SQL queries, the cost that can involved overall, not being centralized within one platform, not shareable with all the team members to be able to responsibilize those individuals. So that's why we at Sifflé, after like using Sifflé for ourselves for internal consumption, we started to consume Sifflé as a way to also track our Snowflake spending and all the tools. And that's also something we start to do more and more with some of our clients as they asked that and they saw the interest. So it was not only a cataloging, a lineage, a quality monitoring tool, but actually a platform where you can also bring inside the cost monitoring of your Snowflake, of your cloud environment. So as a first step, we have one thing which is important. We are on Snowflake Marketplace. And why I'm speaking about that, it's logical in a way that is going to simplify the life of you and our current client as well. So if I'm going to my Snowflake, so this is the example of the Snowflake app that we have developed, which is available on private sharing in our case. So you need to reach out to us to get access to this one. You will get an access to basically, and if I remember correctly, you get an access to know what are the different, I need to refresh, sorry for that. So to know what are the different tables that you have access to, it doesn't want to load the information that I want. So I'm going to look at the slides. It's going to be a bit better. No, for the Sifflé users, so the users that you create for Sifflé to access Snowflake and do the monitoring of your database and tables, know what are the database and schemas that Sifflé is allowed to access. Be able for the list of the data sources that you have in your Snowflake account or organization, be able to actually go click and say, I want to add them on Sifflé and make sure that the Sifflé user and Sifflé as a platform is allowed to do some monitoring on it. So if you want to, here on this database called ABC specifically, be able to add some quality monitoring, checking for nulls, duplication, etc. on those tables. Add the monitors that we give you out of the box. So instead of creating manually the monitors to check and to monitor your credit usage, to monitor your execution fails, to monitor the standard deviation of execution time, etc. Instead of creating them manually, we push them automatically from the Snowflake app into your Snowflake account, and overall setting page, obviously, in this case. So now let's look specifically at the Snowflake, at our Snowflake environment, and we're going to look at some of the monitors that we can provide you out of the box, and there are around 20 of them at the moment in this first version. So navigating to my monitors, in your environment, you will find those monitors being categorized automatically with a tag called Snowflake Cost Monitoring. In this case, I already have like 20 monitors here being created. And if I look, for example, as a kind of classic monitors to start with, will be to look at the credit usage in your organization. So here I have like a weekly one, I have a daily one. So maybe we're going to look at the daily. I think I have overall organization, daily overall organization credit usage. And can see that Snowflake determined what was the kind of seasonality. So which means we see that on weekends, for example, we have a little bit less consumption, which makes sense. And can see that overall we've been on track, but in a kind of upward rising kind of trend specifically here. We have some specific cases, such as here in the 29th of November, on December 12th, some outliers in terms of those numbers. But up to you to decide to investigate or not this one and figure out with the team who've been behind this higher consumption, and if it's actually a problem or not for us in your organization. This is a kind of monitor here, an example where we leave Snowflake with a machine learning to determine the seasonality, but you could imagine to replicate this monitor and give like hard limits and say, I want to be sure on a daily basis, I don't want to consume more than 100 credits, for example, and that's something we can create after together as well. Looking at the same type of monitor, so if I look at, coming back here and going back at my Snowflake tag, so credit usage. So we looked up to now at the daily credit usage overall. So what I want to do here is also for the credit usage per account name and account location. So for example, we can see here we have two of those account name and location where we have an alert declared by Snowflake. If we explore maybe this one, we can see that we are a bit lower in terms of consumption on the 24th of January, which is a good thing overall, I guess. And at some point we were quite higher as well. So maybe I will modify actually this one to make sure to don't receive an alert when I go lower, and I'll only receive an alert, an incident, when we go higher. Maybe looking at this one specifically, we don't have any consumption here, so that's good. And here, this one, we were higher in this case with more consumption. So that's why we also receive an alert. But I'm going ahead here and change this one. And I'm going to ask Snowflake to only alert me when the prediction is greater than the expected upper bound, because I only want to know if there is like a higher consumption specifically here. So fairly simple and easy here. And going back to my monitors, shifting to another type of monitoring that we could do with Snowflake. So if we look at, for example, the queue time on some of my warehouses, that can be obviously useful if you want to figure out if some warehouse is becoming bottleneck, if some of your users are creating queries that is kind of like creating issues for other users in consuming, which indicates potentially you might want to create new warehouses, split between different users, etc., etc. So for example, here, the daily average queue time per warehouse that we have. Again, we have a list of warehouses we have selected. So here in this case, I'm splitting this kind of monitoring per warehouse. And if I'm correct, there will be this one. And looking a bit back in the past, we had this event on November 27th, where we had like a very high queue time, which obviously like could have like impacted all the users specifically, which can help me. I mean, those queries that are being sent, we can retrieve the SQL statement and the SQL query, which can help me directly and say, I'm going back to my Snowflake and potentially explore specifically this one a bit deeper. So for example, here we can see a few of them, like high queue time, where the users, which schemas, what is the query that was actually sent in Snowflake, and be able to better investigate that. But the view here and the big goal here is to be in a position where when this incident happened, so here's being done on a daily basis, but as you could see, had some of my monitors running hourly. I could run them every 15 minutes if even necessary. And obviously you will use a delta query. So you will only query the last 15 minutes, the last 2 hours, the last day of data. So it's going to be cost optimized in this way, and receive an alert, for example, by email and Slack specifically here. So we were looking at one of the monitors I wanted to create. I forgot which one. But for example, if I want to create a monitor with my query history, you can still go on and do that, because with Snowflake, you have now created a Snowflake app on Snowflake. You have created access to those account usage and organization usage in your environment. So you can go and create even more specific monitors that you might want to have. So for example, here, that could be the number of rows inserted in my environment. Why not? Checking for that. Asking Snowflake to look at, maybe the 365 days, and going to run that on a daily basis as well. Add a tag, my Snowflake cost monitoring, to be consistent with the rest, and receive an alert on Slack. I haven't selected Slack for specifically here. So I'm going to send an email to Aaron in this case. And run it again. No need to think about like what is a SQL query you need to write on Snowflake, which table I need to use. It's very easy, very efficient, and very quick. Here specifically, I knew which table to use, but if I want, actually that would be here. Sorry for that. If I want to make sure, like I know, to make sure I'm not too aware which table I should use, I could go ahead and, so for example, I was looking at row inserted, for example, inserted. There we go. And here Snowflake is going to tell me what are the tables with a field that contain the field that I'm looking at. So row inserted in Snowflake. So that's a query history table we look at. All right, so looking back at the monitor we just created, it seems that we are completely fine. There is a very low number of rows inserted, except potentially in the past we had a very high number of rows. I think our environment might not be the most relevant in our case, but I guess in your environment it will be more prompt to have like discover some insights specifically here. So that's basically it, where like specifically here with those kind of monitors, those 20 monitors that we give you out of the box. So I can cover like some credit consumption that you will have in your environment, query performance, warehouse utilizations. You can make sure like to scale up down at some warehouses specifically in your environment, checking for concurrency of users, concurrency of queries, the storage usage that you might do, the data transfer as well are the one we're covering. Which means it's part of the rest of the platform, so that's no extra cost specifically here. The goal here of the webinar is actually more to bring to our current users and to to potential users of Snowflake to understand how they can actually leverage Snowflake in a way that is useful for them in their Snowflake environment. So that will be with quality monitoring, catalog of your data, lineage, and Snowflake cost monitoring. And with that, we're going to look if we have some questions. Let me go back. So one of the question will be around if it works with BigQuery as well, if it can be like replicated with BigQuery. So with BigQuery, the tables are not exposed automatically for an external user. If I know in detail, so basically you can basically make it happen and make it work. So that will be for us a second version of this kind of cost explorer, cost monitoring. But basically, you're going to need to run a job on your BigQuery to make sure you're actually duplicating the data from those specific table on BigQuery, which are hidden from the outside, which are hidden from most users, from non-admin users, to be available for Snowflake to query. So that's basically kind of replicating the data in another table data set, as it's named on BigQuery. Also, question: can I restrict the access of those monitors to only members of my team? Answer yes. So if I show you quickly. So if I go back here, so here I have access to all assets, and that might not be the best environment. Maybe I show you here, for example, here on Project Demo. I have access to all assets, but I can separate with different domains users. So for example, I'm a user part of the data team, part here of the energy team. I can toggle and switch to the energy domain and see only data related to this energy domain specifically, which means you can create those teams and make sure that the data team, the data factory team, the Snowflake data users are part of this domain, and the only people allowed to access the assets, in this case, the Snowflake tables, as well as the monitors, excuse me, the monitors that might be associated with this one. All right, also question: where can I be alerted, and can I see my alerts on my current ticketing system, Jira, for example? Yes, so I was showing on Slack, and we have the option for Slack, Teams, email. We can do as well like the alerting on Jira, PagerDuty as well. So it's flexible in that manner, no problem. And we don't have any more questions. Going to wait a few seconds. So again, if you want to use the Snowflake app, the native app of Snowflake, so it's only accessible for private sharing in this case with us. So we need to be able to enable it to make it accessible on your account. So please feel free to reach out to us at support@snowflakedata.com, or if you already know some members of the team, to reach out to us directly. No problem with that. And with that, I wish you a very good end of the day and end of the week as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Bye.